This is a fictional mindbender. The Freedom series of Gundams are symbolic of the heroic status and idealism of the Gundam Seed Franchise. Piloted by one Kira Yamato, at least mostly, the Freedom represented the ideals of him and Laka's clan regarding their beliefs on the positive nature of humanity, and the freedom to choose what to do with their own lives without any others imposing their wills upon them. And the value of life, even those of your enemies, as all versions of the Gundam often go to great lengths to not kill their enemies, but rather instead disable them, at least in most cases. Other Gundams of the series usually don't carry the same weight of legacy and gravitas, even if representing other themes on a secondary level. For example, the Justice series of Gundams often represented a blend of that idealism but with practicality, that its pilot, Athrun Zala, and Shin Asuka tried to follow the ideals of Kira and their freedom by defeating and not killing their enemies, but were also not above doing so if it came to it. And oftentimes were usually the first ones to start doing it if they recognized that the situation was starting to become too dangerous to take the risk. And then there's the Gundam Destiny, that represented the deadly and aggressively protective nature of its pilot, Shin Asuka, and how seriously that he takes his charge and responsibilities, as well as being a conduit of his own personal inner rage. Having said all that, I do have a bone to pick, as it were, with the Freedom series Gundams, or at least two of them, and I'll explain why. In my opinion, I think the problem with the Freedom is that it's an overpowered beast of a machine, and is used as such. While official databases that I've read call the first Freedom an anti-mobile suit machine, I think of it more as a high-speed mobile armor in a mobile suit body. I honestly believe that if the machine was let off the leash, then Freedom could solo entire fleets all by itself, even without the meteor system. Despite what Laka's clan says about it when she hands the keys of it to Kira, the Freedom clearly has Patrick Zala's machinations in mind. An overwhelming and irresistible firepower only the best of coordinators can wield. But the first Freedom was within reason for me, so I actually kind of liked it. The first nuclear-powered mobile suit gives it near unlimited source of power, and with data taken from the first 5 Gundams applied to it, it made sense to me that it would easily waste all enemies who came across it, even into the Second Valentine War. Perhaps the only enemy that it ever, I think anyway, truly struggled against was the Providence Gundam, which was another Gundam that was also heavily influenced by Patrick Zala's doctrine, and Kira only barely defeating it by sheer luck, with the Freedom being seriously damaged when it made its final death charge on the machine. Kira easily could have died in the attempt, and almost did. That said, the second Gundam of the series, the Strike Freedom, is where I start to take issues. Honestly, this Gundam I feel is the first Gundam that was built more around Kira's personal morals, as well as his abilities, rather than someone else's own personal influence and doctrines, given that its weapon systems are more specifically tailored to dealing specifically with mobile suits with finesse, rather than the first Freedom's use of just sheer but accurate overwhelming firepower. Yet, in this upgrade, and despite it using the same Dragoon system as the Providence and Legend Gundams did, the way Gundam Seed Destiny displays it just feels like your classic Gundam trope of upgrading to a new machine. Its continuing god level of overwhelming all of its enemies, including the Legend Gundam, lacks character originality for me, particularly because it's more tailored to Kira's morals and fighting style than the first Freedom. It also happens to inherit, I think, its flaws of just spamming everything, just now with nuclear power. The same gripe also applies with its upgraded version, the Strike Freedom Type 2, and its ultimate version, the Mighty Strike Freedom. Again, it was an issue of just being too overpowered that it overshadowed the storytelling and character development. Its only real saving grace in my eyes was that the Type 2 was still getting washed by the Foundation's Black Knight mobile suits, which were essentially anti-Gundam mobile suits, as well as their use of superior tactics. Essentially, that when it comes to the Freedom series, it just felt like too much plot armor added on to their already heavy armor. However, the Freedom Gundam that I did like, as well as the first one, and is actually my favorite, was the Rising Freedom. Now, why, might you ask? I mean, it's not nuclear powered. It was more or less just a stand-in for the Strike Freedom anyway. Why do I prefer this one? Because essentially it does what Gundam 00 did in its final battle with Setsuna and Ribbons, downgrading the protagonist's machine to a level where it's still powerful, but now no longer has as much plot armor. It's not nuclear powered, which means that Kira has to use it more aggressively before it loses power, and also more accurately. So, how it fights involves much more close combat than Kira did with any of the other Freedom models. Spam attacks, while they did occur, also were not a good idea because of how much power it was going to use up. The Rising Freedom also looked visually different from its earlier and latter versions, making it a much more distinct and less tropey machine. And that eventually lost and was destroyed, I think represented a massive character development for Kira Yamato as well. Perhaps the only unbelievable moment for me regarding the Rising Freedom was when it was showered with all those spikes, with several barely missing Kira by mere meters. Another Jesus Yamato moment, you might say. But one that's offset by the fact that it pushed the story forward in a very unique way and made the Rising Freedom, and therefore Kira Yamato, much more believable to me since Gundam Seed when it first started. However, there was one other version of Freedom that I happened to like.